Thanksgiving ended with me kicking my narcissistic mother out of my house and telling her I no longer wanted to have a relationship with her. It's a cross point where I either have to stop fighting for that little child in me who just desperately his whole life wanted his mom to just be that protective person that they can go to.
Why does the inner child work? Something that's supposed to be healing and beautiful sometimes turn ugly and exhausting. Why does it start to feel like running in a hamster wheel instead of coming home to yourself? And what do you risk losing when you do that work the romantic, popular way, not the right way? That's what I want to unpack today, because a lot of us, especially those who became the black sheep of dysfunctional families, end up doing this work in ways that make us feel more burned out and stuck. In the video I'm referencing, Ed shares something raw. He says he finally cut off his narcissistic, abusive mother after Thanksgiving. But there is still that heavy feeling in his voice, like a part of him still feels responsible for keeping the relationship alive. Therapy tells him, do the inner child work, but he's tired. He's standing at a crossroads. One direction says, take care of the adult. The other says, take care of the inner child. And he's right in the middle, frozen and overwhelmed by his own healing process. Now, this is not to judge Ed or therapy or anyone doing this work. This is about understanding why and when it can lead to a burnout instead of breakthrough, and how to do it right. Because for people who grew up in dysfunctional families, the experience is way different. When Ed talked about his inner child, he used the third person. Him, he, not I or me. Like there's a separate being inside of him. A separate being that he's responsible for and needs parenting. While Ed didn't specify how he does that, I know how it looks like. A lot of people start recreating their childhood with different endings. They start doing things that they missed out on when they were kids or teenagers. Buying toys they never had, playing games they missed, eating candy they were denied, trying to relive and rewrite the past, maybe to get closure. I get it, I've been there, and it feels comforting. Like you're finally given that part of you what it always wanted. It's kind of empowering, actually. But here is the hidden cost. Now you've created two versions of yourself to take care of. The adult, already juggling bills, work, relationships, health. And then there is the separate entity, the inner child, who also has needs, wounds, and triggers. The crossroads. That is two full-time jobs. And for the child who grew up to a narcissistic parent, you have a huge list of issues to try and rewrite. Chances are you have people-pleasing tendencies. You learned that behavior to protect yourself when you were a kid from the narcissistic parent outburst. Narcissistic parents don't really know anything about boundaries, they think you belong to them. So chances are you don't have very good boundaries. That's another issue. They looked through your things. They do talk about your body. They make comments about your body, especially when you start hitting puberty. So you grew up maybe with privacy issues or maybe sexual issues as well. I can go on and on. People who grew up with normal parents maybe have like one or two of these issues. A little hint of an anxiety, a little hint of people pleasing. You probably have a lot of them. Not to make you feel bad, but just to ask a question. You're telling me that you want to do the inner child work for each and every one of these? How long do you think that's gonna take? Doesn't it sound exhausting? Here's how it looks in reality when you do the inner child work in this specific way of going back to your childhood, to a specific situation that triggered a specific issue, and writing or rewriting the end of that situation. When you do it this way, you solve one issue and then shit happens. That triggers another issue. You solve it and then another shit happens. And then that triggers another issue. You solve it and then more shit happens. So on and on and on. Why? Because you have a list of things to work on. So do you know how that feels like? It feels like running in a hamster wheel, which results in the black sheep burning out. It feels like you're too tired of taking care of yourself, tired of your adult life, tired of therapy, tired of work, tired of cooking, tired of brushing your teeth. Again, been there. You probably could hear it in my voice. Now, I'm not saying don't solve these issues and ignore them. That's definitely not what I'm saying. If you're doing the inner child work, it's knowing how to do it, when to change direction, and when to stop. Ed is standing in a position where we all feel stuck, when you have to choose between two completely opposite choices. Keep going to the past that keeps coming back anyway, and in the meantime miss out on your adulthood? Or forget the past? Or could there be a third option? Well, there is, and here's how to do it right. Start with acceptance. Accept that your childhood wasn't normal. Accept that relationship with a narcissistic parent might never be possible. Not even a small talk, how is the weather kind of relationship. That's grief work. It's sitting with the sadness of what was never going to be. And that's a cry that sounds different from the cry of exhaustion in Ed's voice. That's a cry of grief. I lost something. The right kind of healing helps you move from frustration to mourning, from loops to actual closure. And sometimes that means letting go of stuff you have or memories that you keep tied to the old story. Throw away a doll that you have from your childhood or a picture or anything that still gives you that false hope that maybe someday, because someday isn't coming, but today is here. Going back to the childhood sometimes helps. And here's how. It's to understand something from the childhood and then move on. Live your adulthood. Otherwise, you end up doing healing that feels more like time travel, trying to fix scenes that don't exist anymore, which is essentially just being stuck in a narrative completion. And that's what makes it turn ugly. You don't have to reparent yourself like a separate person. You need to reintegrate yourself. Bring that child back home, not into a new fantasy, but into the present. The truth is, that child grew up. It's you, now, in the present. If you need to revisit a situation in the past, you go in, learn something from it, and you get out, and then you move on. It's about reclaiming you, your right to live now. The past already took too much from you. What is now present from the past is the learned behaviors that you need to unlearn with a lot of effort and work. Look, for a lot of people from dysfunctional families, adulthood already feels delayed. You were never allowed to grow up fully, to have opinions, to set boundaries, to have privacy. You were raised to be the parent's emotional caretaker, not the child. When therapy tells you, go back and reparent yourself, you might end up doing even more caretaking. But this time it's for your inner child. But it's just more parenting. My advice, okay, if you have to do it once or twice. Don't make it your life mission. That's why so many of us end up in burnout. I just came out of that burnout, and honestly, it wasn't beautiful. It feels like healing is like a second job. You're still managing someone else's emotions, only now it's your own past self that doesn't exist anymore. You can love those parts of you, the parts that were hurt, without living as them. You can cry for what you lost without losing yourself in the process. If this resonates with you, share it with someone who's stuck in the same loop, or drop a comment. What's your experience with the inner child work? Last thing I'd say, you don't need another version for yourself to heal. You just need to be you, whole and present right here, right now.